All right, hey everybody. I want to welcome all of our protectors back. It is the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LeBuff here with you. I have Coach Dustin with me. Coach Brad is traveling back from vacation, so he won't be joining us tonight. But listen, protectors, we're going to have a very interesting conversation. I actually wish Brad was here. I'd love to get his insight, but that's okay. Dustin and I are going to deep dive on this. And what I want to share with you, and I'm going to make a personal statement, and then Dustin, when we come back from the intro, can either agree with the statement or disagree. It's up to him. But what I want to share tonight is why I chose to be a good man versus a nice guy. Back in 30 seconds. Hey everybody, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Greg LeBuff, and I'm sharing insights for how I went from the victim of a brutal attempted murder to weaponizing my mind and body, mastering the tool of violence so that I can protect myself and my family from violent criminal assault, and how for the past 30 years, I've been helping good people just like you do the same. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, okay, we are back, and I said I'd make my statement, and Dustin, I'll let you throw in your thoughts on this. But I said that tonight I want to share why I chose to be a good man versus a nice guy. And we can break that down in a second. And Dustin, maybe I'll just get your visceral response. We haven't broken it down yet, but what that means to you. But where do you stand on the good guy versus a good man versus a nice guy kind of theory?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. In all of the 30 seconds I had to kind of think about that. And you know what's interesting is it's all it took, because I just thought about it just quick. And I'm like, what hits me with that? Like you said, what's the visceral response? And right away when you say, I choose to be a good man, it's like, okay, well, yeah, that speaks to character. That makes a ton of sense. If you say, oh, what's a good man? Most people right away are going to start to describe a person's character. What makes them a good man? They're going to go to morals and ethics and, behaviors and things like that. Whereas you go, oh, a nice guy, it's like, well, a nice guy, anybody can act nice, play nice. You know what I mean? There could be a sinisterness, if that's a word, behind being a nice guy. So I think the nice guy doesn't necessarily play to character the same way as a good man. So yeah, I completely agree. And I think they're very, very different things. And it's almost easier to see it when you contrast them the way you did.
Yeah.
I think if you just would have said like, oh yeah, like, are you a nice guy? Like, well, of course I am.
Yeah.
But really what I'm trying to say is, no, I'm a good man.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily know to phrase it that way. But because you put it into contrast right away, it was more evident.
Yeah, that's awesome. A great visceral response too, because which is exactly why I don't ever like to tell you guys what we're going to talk about, because I like just the visualness, and that was a really good breakdown of it. And I'm just recapping what you exactly said, but you're 100% right. You say, there's a good man versus a nice guy, and a good man speaks to character. A nice guy, you can wear that mask, it can be false. I mean, we've heard that, we say this a lot, but, don't listen to what somebody's telling you. Look at what they're doing. Their actions show you their true intentions. Words are very misleading. And oftentimes people say things that they would genuinely hope to do or would like to do, but they don't act in accordance with their words, right? Because it's the paradigms, it's their subconscious programming that ultimately drives their actions. So we always have people that I'm gonna quit smoking, I'm gonna lose weight. They say things, they mean it, they want to, but of course then their subconscious, their paradigms, their programming, has them out drinking and smoking on weekends and not going, all this kind of shit. So great initial breakdown. Now, this may take a bit of a twist, but considering the context of the podcast, right, the Education of a Weaponized Man, and talking about violence, there is a specific aspect I want to break down. So I chose to be a good man versus a nice guy. And maybe let's start by setting a bit of a definition for a nice guy. And this is something that I've heard a few people that I respect talk on this subject. Obviously not exactly the same way, but it has led me to reflect over the years. And so I'm gonna label out a few criteria. This is by no means all inclusive. This is this is my definition, and each person I would submit that you add to this category, take away from this category, interchange them to serve your needs. But I think this is a very powerful exercise. A nice guy. Here's a couple things, and then Dustin, of course, you can Give me some feedback on what you think of my list, what you might add, what you might take away, how you might slightly define it differently, because each of us is going to be individual. I think people are going to get a lot of this by the end of the conversation. So for me, a nice guy, the first thing with a nice guy is that most nice guys are very passive aggressive. And that would be the first thing that I'd throw in there. And what do I mean by passive aggressive? And this almost speaks to what you talked about, Dustin, with the mask that people can wear. When we have chosen and our self-image, okay, remember, you cannot for long outrun or outperform who you truly believe yourself to be. Your self-image is the cybernetic device. It is like the thermostat in your house, right? If you set that thermostat to 70, if the room drops below 70 degrees, that thermostat recognizes that, sends the signal to turn on the furnace and heat that room back up to 70 degrees. It does it, it's auto, it's a cybernetic device, right? It is automatic because it is programmed at this temperature. If it gets too hot, then it shuts the furnace off. Our self-image is the thermostat of our lives. So you cannot outrun or outperform who you truly believe yourself to be. If you label yourself and you have chosen, remember again, conscious or subconscious, doesn't matter. If you've never asked yourself this, what kind of man am I? Who am I? If you've never put the work in, if you've never answered that, that means that somebody or something else has programmed you. And like you said, Dustin, if you ask, are you a nice guy? Context determines content always. So if I asked you just a random, hey, are you a nice guy? You'd say, well, yeah, of course I'm a nice guy. But when we give it in the context of self-image, nice guys are often passive aggressive. Why? Because they need to be seen as the nice guy. Does that make sense? Because again, remember, we are talking in the context of, let's say, interpersonal human aggression, right? Whether it's violence, whether it's a verbal discourse, whatever it is, a nice guy has a hard time because they go, I need to be the nice guy. That is part of my image. I need to live up to my image. I need people to see me as the nice guy in this. And so they are often filled with passive aggressive tendencies. And how does that kind of sit with you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and I know exactly what you mean. I was just trying to think of the right kind of word, the way I wanted to phrase it. I can't come up with it quick enough, but again, it's just more like, if someone's just being nice, or if they're striving to always be nice, it's limiting, because it's like you're trying to behave and maintain this appearance of being nice when really maybe that's not the most appropriate behavior to achieve, I guess, kind of like your overall goal. Do you know what I mean? Not doing a very good job of explaining what I'm trying to say, but the words aren't coming to me, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I get it. Like let me try to put some context in there, like a personal context. Why this conversation resonates for me, and I think maybe I should have just shared this right off the top, so I'll do it now, is because I didn't make the decision. When I was, when you go from like 15, 16, 17, you're a boy, but you're this young man, but you are figuring shit out, right? You have been under the influence of parents and coaches and teachers, in such a confined way, right? Because, we live with our parents, we have teachers around, that's our upbringing. And what I'm getting at is then you get to these more formative years where you get these 18, 19, 20, where you begin to test beliefs, right? You say, I've been told this my whole life, and now I have some autonomy, I have some freedom. But that for me, that 19, 20-year-old is the age I was at when those guys tried to, murder me. Try to, beat you fucking, they beat you unrecognizable. And what I'm getting at is, in this moment, right, I had done martial arts, I had the black belt, I was a sparring partner, I'd done the combat sport, I was, training, 3 hours a day, 6-7 days a week with professional fighters. I mean, and why this is relevant here is because I had skills to fight. And thereby you'd think, well, you had skills to defend yourself, which I did. I mean, we often, violence is very different than sport or martial art, but it is not completely foreign. It is not that you can't use some of the skills to defend yourself. There is obviously crossover to a degree. Violence just is a very different thing. But my point is that one of the one of the things that I remember most clearly is that I could not, because the violent assault was so overwhelming, the predatory aggression, the blitz was so violent, so sudden, so, like, again, it's such a different energy when people aren't trying to hurt you. People are trying to kill you, like holding you down, putting the bottle to your eye, and as hard as they can, trying to smash the bottle into your eye, like where you cannot move, you cannot turn your head, you cannot tuck and cover, like you're literally being held as if like your head is stabilized and it is just tapped and hit. Like there's a savagery to that. And what I'm getting at is that inside of me, I was submissive. That's the best way to describe it. Like, and I understand that, like, it's people think it's the fight flight dichotomy, but it's really fight flight posture and submit. And so if we are hit with this intense fight, like this intense, like a blitz assault, we can be kicked into, like, physiologically, psychologically, we can be triggered into a submissive state. And this is what happened to me. But my point is that if I look back on it, although I had fighting skills and all that type of stuff, I was a really nice guy. I recognized that anytime I expressed anger, I was passive aggressive. I wasn't like an overtly confrontational person, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We don't want to be overtly confrontational, right? But I'm just trying to draw a parallel that I felt this nice guy, like I was passive aggressive, and in this moment of this, unprecedented level of violence and hatred and debasing and dehumanizing behavior, specifically and singularly directed towards me, that didn't serve me. And so this passive, go ahead, jump in.
So I'm just gonna say, as you're talking, I thought of an analogy that'll kind of clear up the point I was trying to land earlier, and then also fits very well with what you're talking about, that most people can relate to. Like anybody watching this, if it's a parent, I think will understand this analogy. And it's like, if you look at parents who are more concerned with being their kid's friend than their parent, you run into the same trap. Do you know what I mean? Like you're trying to be nice all the time. And that's sort of what I was saying, where it can limit you. It's like, as a parent, you don't always want to be the nice parent. Like sometimes you have to be hard. Sometimes you have to be angry. Sometimes you got to be firm. Like there's different qualities and characteristics you have to bring to the forefront.
Yeah.
And if you're totally being limited to like, well, no, I want to make sure my kid likes me. Well, you know what? Your kid's probably not going to turn out to be the best behaved kid. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I think most parents understand that, and they've seen other parents who tend to be more the best friend parent, and their kids typically aren't all that well behaved.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Like when it comes to what we're talking about in being nice versus a good man, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to, so I was going to go through my whole list of like the qualities of this nice guy, but I think we need to get into this and set the contrast, because this is where I want people to really, this is a lot of the meat of the conversation. As a nice guy, and most nice guys, in my opinion, they're passive aggressive. And there's a danger right now, because I believe that, and this has been going on for a while, but especially today, right now in the world, a lot of men are being raised to be and conditioned to be very naive, weak, and overall harmless, because there is this cancel culture around toxic masculinity. And, this is something we've talked about, or I've talked about in the past a little bit, but we've never really fully delved into this, and I've never really shared my thoughts on this, but I'm going to set something up. A nice guy is very passive aggressive. I'm going to throw my next on the list. They're very emotional. And we are human creatures, right? Human creatures are emotional-based creatures. We are not logical-based creatures. We are emotional-based, meaning we feel things first, and then those feelings become our thoughts. We do not intellectually think first and then feel second. We feel it. And the feelings are what determine our actions. But those feelings become thoughts. Now, our thoughts can help impact our feelings. We can use metacognition, the power of, we can control what we think about. And we can change what we think about, so therefore we can change and impact our emotions. But I'm saying that we emotionally feel shit first. And nice guys are emotional guys. I was a very emotional young man. And that emotions led me to be very passive aggressive because I was a nice guy. Now you can have a young man or young woman, but a young man that is emotional and has suffered a lot of toxic trauma and shit in their lives, and they're not passive aggressive, they're fucking overtly aggressive. Neither is good because neither has any type of control. Someone that is passive aggressive is not in control of this. And someone who is overtly fucking aggressive and angry and filled with fucking hate and constantly lashing out and expressing the toxicity of their emotions, because right, whatever is felt, whatever is impressed, will ultimately get expressed. So if we look at these nice guys that we have, if you're conditioning people and men are not allowed to explore masculinity, and if they do too much of what society might perceive as hyper-masculine, then that becomes this bad thing. But I'm going to set the counter side to it. When you choose to be a good man, right? A good man is three things in this very specific order. You talked about a good man is a man that develops character. Okay, so here's the thing. A good man makes himself. He trains himself. He engages in the work to become a competent man. And this is where I think they need to be. A good man becomes a competent man who becomes a dangerous man. He becomes dangerous. He becomes formidable. And then, and only then, does he become peaceable. Now, I'm not saying, when I say that only then he becomes peaceable, I'm not saying that as a dangerous, formidable man, he wreaks havoc unto the world. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're talking about the growth and development. This is the weaponizing process. I'm just talking about the psychology behind what we do. When people come to us, they don't fully understand this. People can come and say, listen, I've been the victim of a violent assault. Or I recognize that in this world, there's people in this world, and if you give them half a fucking chance, they're willing to hurt you. And I don't want that. I want to be able to protect myself, and I want to be able to protect my family. I have kids now. I have a wife, and I want to fucking protect them. So what they're saying is that, when you say, I want to learn how to defend myself, what you're saying is I need to become a dangerous fucking man. I cannot afford to just be this nice guy. I cannot afford to just have this fucking unregulated passive aggressiveness. I cannot afford to be an emotional man. Like, I'm not saying and people would mistake this. Warriors are not less emotional. They are not hardened. They are not numbed to their emotions. They are the exact fucking opposite. Nice guys who are passive aggressive have never learned to express their emotions. One of the signs I always ask somebody, hey, how are you doing? Hey, how are you feeling? There's somebody, hey, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? And they'll say, I'm okay. Okay is not an emotion. They can't even tell you how they're feeling. Say, how are you feeling right now? I'm good. Why? What the fuck what are you asking for? That's a fucking weird question. They cannot even understand. They can't sit for half a second and go, how am I feeling? They can't talk in emotions. So that's what we mean when I say they are emotional. Nice guys are passive aggressive and they're fucking emotional. Meaning they everything is just happening inside of them and they either suppress it down or they fucking ignore it. But not a good man. A good man has invested in knowing who the fuck he is. Right? I'm going to throw another one out here. A good man, okay, is a man who lives with values. A man who lives by core values. So that's got to be on the list of good men. They have core values. Well, how do you figure out what your core values are? By doing the work, by figuring out your paradigms, what your emotional makeup is, how to fucking regulate your emotions. How many times have we said, right? If you regulate your response, you win. If you don't, you fucking lose every single time. And that is on every level. That is in life. That is in violence. If you cannot regulate yourself, you will fucking lose. I don't care what the battle is. I don't care what field you're fighting on. Emotional, mental, physical, it doesn't matter. You're going to fucking lose. Why? Because you are this emotionally out of control person. And that'll lead to the wrong type of aggression. Whether it's passive aggression or whether it's fucking hate-fueled aggression or whatever it is, because you are emotionally out of control, you are living reactively. Right? That's the difference. And so let me just get a couple of your thoughts when I say that a good man is a capable man. he is a dangerous man, he is a formidable man, and then he becomes a peaceable man, in that order.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's that, I don't know who the quote's from, but it talks about how, if you're not capable of violence, you can never truly be capable of peace. You're just harmless.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought when I didn't address all four, but specifically the dangerous man to the peaceable man, that's what hit me. And if people actually start to unpack that, it makes a lot of sense. Because if you aren't capable of violence when needed, right? Exactly talking about what you just said, you have to have a code, you have to have values, that you live by. But if you aren't capable of actually being dangerous, being violent, well, then you can never actually choose to not be. You can never choose to be peaceable,
Yeah.
right? So therefore, in a sense, you're just harmless,
Yeah.
which again is kind of more that nice guy. You're just harmless at that point.
Listen, a harmless man is a useless man. I believe that. I believe that 100%. And people would say, well, why? Why do you need to be dangerous? Why that word? And most people that would get hung up on that would get hung up on the word, because to them, when you say something that is dangerous, they think something that is negative, right? Because from a young age, no, don't touch those chemicals under the kitchen sink because they're dangerous, meaning that if you touch them, it'll kill you. Oh, don't go near that guy. That guy's a registered sex offender who's shouldn't even be out, but he mandatory release, whatever. Don't go near him. He's dangerous. So our definition of dangerous, you have to expand that.
Well, it's like you. I mean, how many times do you say context determines content?
Yes.
Same thing. Anybody who has any kind of pushback about being dangerous, it's like, well, give them a different context just to allow them to draw the parallels, not because this context is more correct. But I mean, take law enforcement, take military. Like, how would you like to have a military that had no weapons, no dangerous men, none of that stuff? Yeah. When somebody like Putin decides to invade your country. Yeah. Well, all of a sudden, a whole lot of people are going to be like, oh, no, of course you need that. Yep. Well, yeah, of course you do. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a time and a place where it's appropriate. And in that context, people are like, well, yeah, of course, that's easy. They're not going to argue with you. But in the context of what we're talking about, where you're talking about individual men, what makes a good man, it's no different. But people, like you said, they just have that initial gut reaction to like, oh, it's automatically negative. Yeah. Well, not really. Not if the good man is going to use it to do good. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, it's a tool. We talk about that all the time. Violence is a tool.
100%. And
it's not positive. It's not negative. It's just a tool.
Exactly. And what you just said reminded me of the quote. I mean, and almost everybody has heard this quote, right? But people sleep peacefully in their bed at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. So let's take rough men and put in the word dangerous, because dangerous fucking men. You don't think these tier one operators that we have, that we spend all this, millions of dollars invested in their training, their psychological development, you know what I mean? Like screening, selection, all this stuff. We send them into harm's way. We send them into foreign countries to deal with, the fucking scum of the earth. And they go into their territories, fight them in their homes, so that we don't have to see that, witness that, or be exposed to that on our home soil. Our wives, our children, do not have to see that. Well, that's a fucking very dangerous man that you're creating. But here's the thing. If you say military, you say law enforcement, and you say dangerous, or like a tier one operator, he's a dangerous man, he's a soldier, whatever, people automatically go, he is the righteous man, he is the sheepdog, he is the protector, he could do no harm to the sheep. So most people right away go, But for some reason, you say, oh, are you in the military? No, I'm not in the military. Or are you in law enforcement? No, I'm not in law enforcement. So what do you do? Well, I'm a civilian, but we study weapon. We weaponize. We're men. We are professional men of arms, or professional men of violence. And people are like they're terrified, right? Because you're a civilian who's a dangerous man. Yeah.
Yeah, for some reason that right away correlates to out of control, crazy, unpredictable, and it's like, why? Why? That makes no sense.
If you logged the amount of hours that I have spent studying violence, training for violence, weaponizing in violence, doing scenarios in violence, the amount of hours that I have, but in comparison to even a well above average law enforcement officer or soldier, is 80 to 1, 100 to 1. The tier one guys, no. The tier one guys have A prolonged intensive exposure at the highest fucking level with millions of dollars put into them, of course. But 30 years of training, not one day a week, not in a recreational club with 50 other people where you spend time fucking talking, 20-minute warm up, 5 minutes of class time, and then a 30-minute cool down, then you go home and come back in a week. You know what I mean? Like professionally training, one-on-one, private, intensive personal training programs with the greatest combat educators in the world. I mean, my instructors were contracted with the Navy SEAL teams. I have done 50x the intensive personal training programs that the Navy SEALs got with them. You know what I mean? And you have done, 100x with me. Like it is, good people who are the true first responders in our lives, in our situations, in our neighborhoods. We are the fucking first responders. When I witnessed the road rage and 4 guys jumping out of a car with tire irons, going at a young couple in their car with kids in the backseat, trying to smash up the windows who are blocked in traffic, there was no police there. It was me running across 4 lanes of traffic. You know what I mean? You see, whenever I've been out, we've witnessed violence happening. The police were not there. I was there. Police weren't there. So, in our society, we need dangerous fucking people. And a dangerous man, like again, I was the nice guy. We do not need a passive aggressive individual. We do not need somebody that is emotional when it comes to a crisis. Right? We do not need someone that has no fucking core values. And where do the core values come from? The core values come from studying life and death like we do in the weaponization process. We study violence. We study criminality. We spend hours doing it, meaning what? We actually understand. My necessity to be able to recognize true violence that is and does create imminent grievous bodily harm or death, where it is reasonable for me to assume that I need to be able to see that. You need to be able to see that. Dangerous men need to be able to see and know that they can recognize real fucking danger. Not ego, not antisocial aggression, not posturing, not status display bullshit, real fucking violence. So when we say that a man needs to work at becoming a competent man, I believe men need to know how to protect. I believe it's a primal part of our nature. Not every man is going to want to learn to protect, but I believe that every man needs to be not only a provider, but a protector. Those are the 2 criteria. Until our women and children stop looking to us for protection, and I'm not saying to the exclusion of their own protection. The greatest way for me to keep my wife safe and my daughter safe is to teach them how to keep themselves safe. So I'm not just talking gender, but I'm saying as a man, there is something primal. I'm speaking as a man because this is my experience as I'm living this life. And I did not have this when I was younger. I thought I did. All I cared about, I didn't give a fuck about kickboxing. I didn't care about trophies and tournaments and belts. I didn't give a shit about any of that stuff, and I still don't. But even back then when I was doing it, I didn't give a shit. I wanted to learn how to defend. Why? Because there was something primal in me that said I needed to both learn how to be a provider and learn how to be a protector. Men go through life learning how to be a provider. And yet if you are not a good provider for your family, how does it emotionally feel to men? I don't care what society deems it as. As a man, when you cannot provide for your family, you feel less than a man. Whether that's hardwired into our DNA and our programming or just how we are brought up, the paradigms of belief. My wife can work and provide for herself. Doesn't mean I still don't want to provide for my family. It doesn't matter if Christy makes enough money to take care of herself and the kids and me, great, but I still want to provide. I still want to be out there contributing. As a man, I need to be a provider. And it doesn't always have to be again, financially, emotionally, whatever it is, I want to provide. It's in me, but I also want to protect. And I believe as a man, if you're not taught how to do both, then for a lot of men, there's something missing. And that forces you into this. Well, what are you then? You're a provider. Great. But you cannot protect. So you're just a nice guy. And when you're a nice guy in this world, you are naive to think that you don't have to be a protector. You have a weakness that others can and will fucking exploit because you simply do not know how to protect. If you didn't know how to provide, that would be a weakness. And it would be one that most people would have to show up and say, well, I better go to fucking school, get an education, get a career. I better get a trade. I better get a fucking skill. I better do something. Because if that's a weakness that I don't understand how to provide, I'm going to fucking starve to death. Or my kids will starve to death. Or my wife will starve to death. Or my family or whatever, however you want to. Is that yes or no? Is that a weakness or isn't it a weakness? Because money is what we need to survive. I don't give a fuck how much of it you have. Money doesn't necessarily in and of itself, you have more money, you're happier, you're more, no. But we do need to provide the necessities to function. Especially, it's like I always think of it as self-defense. Let me ask you this. What is the hardest thing to do when it comes to defending? What is the hardest thing to do?
Deciding to start.
Okay.
Like deciding to start the process of learning how.
Sure. But what is the hardest thing to do? Protect yourself?
No, protect somebody else.
There you go. The
100%.
hardest thing to do is to protect somebody else. You defending yourself, is that easier or harder than you defending your 2 kids plus your wife?
Oh, yeah. Way infinitely harder. 10x, 100x harder when
Yes.
you have to worry about somebody else.
Yes.
100x.
So look at this. Yeah. Let's look at the provider role. To provide for yourself doesn't take a whole lot. You can survive. You might not be super happy or super healthy, but you can provide enough to sustain your life, and you can do that for years. Homelessness, drug addicts, all the time they do it. But to provide for somebody else, automatically you have to be stronger. You have to be stronger. If you have demons that fuel drug addiction, if you have demons that fuel whatever it is, an incapacity to socialize, but whatever it is. So you're homeless. You might not have a drug addiction at all, but you can't maintain a job. You can't maintain housing. You can't whatever. You get what I mean? By yourself, you can survive. But the second you made a decision to have to provide for somebody other than you, and then another person, and another person, 2, 3 people, a family, you got to be fucking stronger than your demons. And so the second you decide to protect, you need to be fucking stronger. And if you don't know how to protect, you're naive. Because in this world, there are people out there, man. And they will fucking burn everything that you care about to the ground without ever looking twice, without ever blinking twice. So you cannot afford to be fucking naive. Men cannot afford to be naive. I don't think women can either. Go ahead.
I think that's a super important point, right? Because it's like it goes so much beyond just deciding to protect.
Yes.
Because I think that's a trap that a lot of men can tend to fall into too easily. Is like, oh yeah, no, I 100% agree with everything you're saying. And if somebody tried to mess with me or my family, like, oh, I'd kill them, I'd do this, I'd do that. But they don't actually have any capability to do that.
Yeah.
There's no ability to actually follow through with what they're saying. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I would, for sure I would. I'd just go crazy. I'd black out. We've talked about that lots.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to go further than just deciding, right? Which is what you just sort of started to allude to.
Yeah.
And I think just a lot of people it's almost like denial, right? Like they have themselves convinced that they're miraculously going to be able to pull something off when they face violence because they don't really understand what violence is. Yeah. There's that whole other conversation of violence being its own language.
Yeah.
Almost like being on a plane and the pilot has a heart attack. Like, yeah, I mean, you absolutely could grab the controls and try and land that thing. And maybe by some small miracle, you pull it off. It's not impossible,
yeah,
but it sure as hell ain't probable.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing when it comes to protecting.
100%, yeah. And and if we push through the final concept of you are naive, you are weak, right? Because you simply lack the skill, the capacity to do it. Then it comes to what you were talking about a little bit before you started to unpack this. You're helpless. Mm-hmm. In a situation where you face interpersonal human aggression, and the 3 synergize each other. At first, you never believed it would ever happen to you. So there's that, you were naive, which amplifies the shock and awe of what is happening. And then you're weak. You're weak in the sense that you have no efficiency. You have zero efficiency. I mean, you know, how many times we've seen videos of big guys, like muscular guys, big guys, all the guys that represent the guys that be like, I'd fucking kill someone, fuck my family. And then all of a sudden you see this guy and he goes to throw a punch and you can see he doesn't have a clue. He's never thrown a punch a day in his life. He thinks because he's seen it, he thinks, well, I can do that. Or he's thrown a couple punches at heavy bag and he thinks he looks good. He thinks he can do it. But you don't even understand. In violence, throwing a punch is one of the softest things you can do. It's one of the worst things you can do. Punching is for what you do to your brother. You know, it's what you do with you and your cousin get in a fight and you don't actually want to hurt somebody, you punch him. Now, again, I'm not saying that punches can't kill people, but I'm saying that by design, as a tool of relaying injury onto the human body, the punch is very, very low on the efficiency chart.
Yeah, I was gonna say it comes down to more efficient, less efficient.
100%. It's not that it's not possible, but it's, you know what I mean? It's very, very low in the efficiency. So you're naive, so the shock and awe is amplified. You're weak because you have no efficiency. You have no efficiency and you're already behind the gap. Because no efficiency and shock and awe leads to greater increased hesitation. And then at the end of it, well, what are you? Well, you're pretty fucking harmless. Because this fits in with that segment of people that have no interest in learning to protect themselves because they are harmless because they have subconsciously or consciously made a decision that they would rather be injured than hurt or injure. And again, it's a tough thing for people to accept. But when you do not invest any time into understanding how to use the tool of violence to protect innocent people, you're naive, you are weak, and you are harmless. And that is all connected with this nice guy. And again, I'm not speaking of anybody other than sharing with you my truth. I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about this is exactly who I was. So people can argue all day long and say, no, I'm not judging you. I'm telling you where I was. I'm telling you who I used to be. I'm telling you where I came from. And I'm telling you what I have seen because you know the one thing that you can always recognize in somebody else is the thing that you know about yourself. A fucking con man can always tell a con man. You know what I mean? A killer can tell a killer. And a nice guy can tell another nice guy. And that's what I was.
Well, this is all.
Go ahead.
This is all by design, right? Like, just like nobody's born with amazing skill sets or speaking certain languages or values or beliefs. It's all built, right? Yeah. That's all we're talking about. We're not saying like, oh, we're fortunate because you and me, that we're just lucky because we're like this and now we're trying to convert everybody else.
Yeah.
We were everybody else.
Yeah.
And then we studied and we learned and we practiced and, you know, we've built this by design.
Yes.
And anybody can. That's the thing, right? Like,
yeah. You come back again. People often come and say, why do you want to learn to weaponize? And they say, you know, well, I want to be more confident. I like to have more. And so I say, well, you know, confidence is a byproduct of certainty. And certainty often doesn't come to you through capability. So you say, I want to learn a skill like punching or kicking or elbowing or ground fighting or knife fighting or whatever. Developing a skill does not in and of itself really have almost any bearing on you feeling more certain and more confident. Certainty and confidence comes from time and experience, meaning you do it. I love it. There's one phrase where it's like, when you start something, you suck. And you suck so bad that you're not good at it. And then you keep doing it. You keep doing it. You keep doing it. And eventually you suck less enough to do something correct. You know what I mean? It's like, I suck so little that I had success with that. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's where certainty comes. Like, I've been there and I've done that. Like, that's the saying. You've been there and done it. Put it in the hopper. Do it again. Do it again. And you just get used to this. Like, yeah, man, failure is like, it's a weird, crazy thing. But when you do something over and over and you fail and you fail and fail, you get more certainty and more confidence from that. if it's trained in the right way. But that was, that is exactly how the training process worked for me. It was like I had full permission to fucking suck because why would you be anything other than shitty? You know what I mean? And then it was like all of a sudden you're so shitty, but it's like it's okay to be shitty. Just get in there and continue to be fucking shitty. And then all of a sudden one day you're not as shitty. And you're just like, fuck. And then it's like, well, yeah, of course I'm not shitty. Why? Because I fucking do it all, like day in and day out. Been there and done that. And it's like, I found that like this certainty came and this confidence came. And it was all by a byproduct though. And it was like, it was so neat that this certainty and this confidence came. And I used to have, my instructors would always say this to me. It was a certain point in my training that say, you got to start getting off on how fucking badass you are. You got to start getting off on how fucking dangerous you are becoming. And in the beginning, I really had pushback to that because my little fucking brain and my little perception could only hear that through the ego. And it would have been easy and it would have been nice to go, you're fucking right, I am. But I didn't have that. I was broken and beaten from, people trying to murder me and not being able to defend myself. I felt like a total fraud as a man. So when they say, like, you got to start getting off on how fucking badass you are, how dangerous you are fucking becoming, my ego would go, you're not dangerous. You didn't even get a punch up. You did nothing to defend yourself. They like nothing. You're not dangerous. They're fucking lying to you. But as I continued to work and suck less and less, as I continued to go, and the certainty, this confidence came, one day they explained it to me in a way that it flipped. And they said, listen, when we say to you, you are becoming a dangerous motherfucker, we're not talking from the ego. We're not saying you can't be killed. We're not saying you can't lose. We're not saying any of that stuff. What we're saying is that you have made a decision to learn how to fucking protect yourself. Meaning, they may fucking get you. Your body may fucking fall, but they cannot and never again will they ever be able to defeat your fucking warrior spirit. Right? Because you have now said, I'm committed. I am no longer fucking naive about this shit. I lived it. Right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You are not being naive. So you were woke. You are not weak because now you know what the fuck to do. You're investing in what to fucking do. And what we're showing you to do is the most brutally efficient you can do, things that you can do. Now, whether you're successful at it or not is irrelevant. Divorce yourself from the result. Because not only are you not naive, you will see the fucking shit coming. You are no longer weak because you will fucking engage. You will engage in the fucking battle. Physically, mentally, emotionally, physiologically, spiritually. You will fucking engage. And whether you die or whether you live, whether you succeed or whether you quote unquote fail is irrelevant because you are not weak anymore. And thereby, if you're not naive and you're not fucking weak, you are no longer can you be a harmless man. And if you're not a harmless man, then you are fucking dangerous to somebody. An animal, a wild animal that attacks a fucking lion that grabs a gazelle by the neck, but the fucking gazelle thrashes and kicks and spears and fights back. Again, now the gazelle doesn't have, it's not the most formidable, adversary for a lion because they're different species. But a man attacking a man, relatives, he's got two fucking arms, I got two fucking arms. He's got fingers, I got fingers. He's got teeth, I got teeth. Right? He's got legs, I got fucking legs. He's got a mind, I got a mind. He's got the capacity to think evil, I got the capacity to think fucking evil. He's got eyes, I got eyes. We are not different species. I don't have my eyes on the side like prey. You know what I mean? Where he has his eyes forward for depth perception and hunting. We are equal that way. So you're not fucking weak. And if you're not weak, then you're dangerous to that motherfucker because you will and can fucking fight back. That clicked for me. This shit has nothing to do with winning. Yeah, I want to survive, but this has nothing to do with winning. You don't have to fight these people. You got to fucking beat these people. That's it. You don't have to fight them. You got to beat them. You don't have to compete with them. You just got to fucking beat them. And that's when I started recognizing my greatest assets. What made me dangerous was the same thing that makes bad guys dangerous, which is the mind and my capacity to think fucking evil for good. Think evil for good. Can you think evil when your children's lives are at stake? Fuck yes. Why? Because I wasn't naive and I invested in training, so I ain't fucking weak. I'm not fucking harmless. That right there, man. I said, like, I'm sharing from a man's perspective. Our organization, we're teaching people to weaponize. Men are 99.99% of our clientele. Not because we don't think women should do this or can't do this, because women don't come and do this. Should they come do this? You're fucking rights they do this. They should. Do they? No, they don't. And I can't change the women's paradigms. They'll go and invest maybe in a couple hours self-defense course, but that's about as far as they want to go. But either way, that's the side point. What I'm saying is that this is what I want for my daughters. This is what I want for my wife. My best way to protect them. The hardest thing to do is to protect other people. The best thing I can do for them is make sure that I'm raising my daughters and that my wife, and I'm helping her, they are becoming dangerous people. Dangerous and fucking formidable. Why? Because life is fucking hard. Who here doesn't right now want their kid to be a formidable force in this game of life? Now, some people might think, that the second, if my daughter's formidable, that means that somebody else has to lose. Now, listen, in life, my daughter can be dangerous and fucking formidable, and she can thrive, and so can everybody else's kids. There is more than enough for everybody to have what they want. But there are people, and everyone knows this, in jobs, in life, in dating, in all these things that are not trying to thrive and achieve. They are not trying to be formidable in their own lives and dangerous and motivated and all stuff. There are people that are trying to destroy those that are naive, that are weak, and that are harmless. Send your daughter to university, naive, weak, and harmless. And go to bed tonight and sleep peaceably in your bed. Not a chance. I couldn't do it. No. But then again, I can't lay my head down on the pillow and go to bed as a naive, weak, and harmless man either. So this was, and I don't know. I don't know if I have to say it, so I guess I'll just say it in case I need to say it. This has nothing to do with fucking genetics. It has nothing to do with how tall you are. It has nothing to do with how much you weigh or what your body fat ratio is or how much, muscle density you have or how athletic you are or what sports you played or what trophies you won or what accolades you might have received. It has nothing to do with your fucking, IQ levels and SATs. And it has this is a fucking choice. We are the human species. And you have to make a fucking decision to be a nice guy or to be a good fucking man. And if you're going to be a good man, you better be at the top of the list, a provider and a protector. You need to be dangerous, you need to be formidable, and then peaceable. And I'm not obviously I was raised, Catholic. I'm not a deeply religious person by any means. I have my beliefs. But there is in the Bible, and most people have heard this. You don't have to be religious to hear this, but I've heard this. I was raised in this. We've heard it. The meek shall inherit the earth. And as often is the case, that was very poorly translated. Just like in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill was poorly translated, and the real meaning is thou shalt not murder. Now there's a fuckload of difference between murdering a man and killing. You know what I mean? Even in the Bible, lawful, what was it? David killed tens of thousands of men in lawful righteous combat, and he was one of Jesus's favorite. You know what I mean? And yet then he murdered one man to get to his wife and fell out of, there's a difference between this. So the translations of things are important. And so my thing was the meek shall inherit the earth is more properly translated as I've heard it to be more like a man that has a sword and knows how to use it, but keeps it sheathed, shall inherit the earth. That's very powerful. I mean, Jordan Peterson, I think, actually breaks that down in one of his little things that you can see. And if you think about that again, and there's another quote, it is better to be a warrior standing in a garden than a gardener in a war. Exactly what we're talking about. So I don't care if you never face violence and you never have to use the tool of violence in the preservation of your life. But you still need to, as a man, I believe, for most men, they need to become dangerous. They need to become formidable. And then once they have achieved that, that is truly when you become a peaceable man, because you choose it, because you have choice. That's what it is. Peaceful is, I think this is exactly what you had said, Dustin. You're peaceful when you have the power, but you choose not to use it. That's someone choosing to be peaceable. If you go, I have no power to harm you. I never anticipated ever needing to. I have no skill sets to do it. And therefore, and only for those reasons, I shall not do it. You didn't choose peace. You're harmless. You were naive, weak, and harmless. And that is very, very different. And from, like, again, when I think back to who I was becoming as a young man and who I was at the time of my assault, I was those, of course, because where did they teach us? They had already begun, society had already begun from me at a young age. The last thing my parents ever thought about doing was raising me to be dangerous or formidable in my life. Because none of that is equated to raising good, moral, godlike, God-fearing children or members of society. But the weak men, the weak boys, are the ones who shoot up the fucking schools. Those two young men that went in Columbine and murdered those kids, they were weak men. They were weak, weak men. Virginia Tech, every mass shooting that you want to look at, they are conducted by weak men, not good men. Right? They are conducted by men that are passive aggressive or out of control with their angers and emotions. They have no core values. They're fucking backstabbing. They don't make good husbands, partners, and boyfriends. They are not providers, and they sure as fuck aren't protectors. Whereas a good man, they are savage fucking servants. Right? They're savage fucking servants. They're competent and they're capable. They were willing to stand in the fucking gap. And whether that gap, what waits for them the gap is violence through interpersonal human aggression, or it is the fear, the uncertainty, the chaos, and the erraticness, the fucking fook of life, they are willing to stand in the fucking gap. And then they come home and fucking lie down on the ground and their children are jumping all over them. You know, it's you develop both sides. When you weaponize, when you stop being fucking naive, weak, and harmless, you become dangerous, formidable, and peaceable. You have developed, not only have tapped into and harnessed the tool of violence, and you become a man of violence, not a violent man, a man of violence, but you have equally, to achieve that, developed your empathy, your compassion, your humility. Those things they are not diametrically opposed. The more dangerous you become, the more formidable you become, the more you anchor and learn and train and weaponize and you master the tool of violence, the less loving you become, the less peaceable you become, the less empathy, for bullshit. You cannot tap into ruthlessness and killer instinct without tapping into compassion and empathy. Those two are synergistic. They cannot be separated. They are like the heart and the mind.
It's no different than, who are the people walking around that have the greatest appreciation for life? It's the people who had a near-death experience.
Yes.
It's the same thing. It's like the closer you've come to death, the greater the appreciation you have for life. And it's the same as what you're talking about. When there's any kind of dichotomy, yes, The more you understand one end, the better you understand the other end.
Yes. Yes, 100%. And I was going to ask a question, which is more important, the heart or the mind? But one can't exist without the other. The mind is this powerful, thing that we understand so little about still, right? But yet without the heart beating and pumping oxygen and blood, you know what I mean, without our lungs, but pumping blood to the brain would be useless. And there's a book that I would recommend that ties into what we're talking about here. And it is written by Eric Greitens, a former U.S. Navy SEAL, and it's called The Heart and the Fist. And I believe that anybody listening to this, if you have not read The Heart and the Fist by Eric Greitens, you absolutely need to buy the book, read the book, download it on Audible or wherever you get your audio books from, listen to it. I believe you people, I think it's powerful. I think you should read the book, and I believe you should listen to the book, and then I believe you should read and listen to the book at the exact same fucking time. I believe you should anchor that book. It is so well written. It is funny. It is inspiring. And it is his journey as he started as a young man, as a humanitarian, wanting to do peaceful things in the world to help people. And through his experiences, realizing that the heart alone was not going to change the world, and he needed to develop the warrior side of himself, the fist. And that is his journey that led him to become a Navy SEAL, and how he merged those two things together. And that is what we're talking about. Dangerous, formidable, and peaceful man. That is, a massive core of the weaponizing process. That's been a huge part of the journey in my life, and I know for you as well, Dustin. And I don't know, I just thought this was I hope we did this conversation justice, because we spend often a lot of time, when we're having meals together, when we're sitting out and after training and having a cigar or a drink and talking. This is often where our conversations go to, is these type of deep topics, the core values of warriorship, all of this stuff, and so I thought that this was really a really good thing. It's too bad Brad wasn't here, but of course we can talk about this further in the future. But I don't know, anything on your end that you maybe want to throw in as we start to summarize this?
More as a side note, because there's going to be at least one person out there that watches this, listens to this. Maybe it's right away, maybe it's down the road, but there will be someone out there who's going to say to themselves, "Oh yeah, if I was 20 years younger, yeah, I'd do that too." And it's like, stop, stop, don't think that way. Because okay, I was fortunate. I found this at a younger age. Good for me. Yeah. But it's not an excuse, because you never know. Like it may literally save your life or someone's life that you love, or maybe it's a complete stranger. Yeah. But this kind of thing, this weaponizing process, it's too important to say, I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm too that. It's like, you never are. You never are. Because you can always make a difference in some way or on some scale.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think we just cap it off, summarize that part with there is no retirement. There is no forced retirement. There is no retirement age on weaponizing and being a protector and being a dangerous man, because even as we may push into our late years, and as God forbid, health declines and all these different things, if we have our mind and we have our air in our lungs, we can continue to be dangerous and formidable in our thoughts, in our actions, in our teachings, in our passing of knowledge, in our helping to rear the next. I mean, there is always a time and a capacity for you to weaponize in your life, and up to the very end. So 100%. It's a great way to wrap this up, and and I don't know. I think we'll leave it at that. It was a great conversation. I think there's definitely more to say on the subject, but I think we'll leave it here for now. So, all right, Dustin. Well, thank you so much, man. As always, I appreciate your time and your input. This was a good one, and for everybody that's listening and watching, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Again, we're never going to be taking on sponsors or run ads in any of our videos or any of our content. My whole goal and our whole goal here is to put this information out there to help people weaponize, to change their lives, to become more dangerous, formidable in their own lives, for themselves, their families. So please take a few seconds, follow us here on the YouTube channel. Make sure that you hit subscribe and set notifications so that anytime we go live, you get that so you can join us live. Wherever you get your favorite podcasts, be sure to check out the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. It takes less than 60 seconds to leave a comment, write a review. Hopefully you enjoyed enough to leave a 5-star review. That is how we are going to get our information and our message to more people. We are doing this organically. We are not using any paid ads. So it is only by trying to offer something of genuine value to people. And if they feel that and appreciate that, they will help us spread the message and pass it on, pay it forward. And that is what we're asking you to do. That is my only ask. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. We just want to help people become infinitely safer in their lives. So that is it, guys. Thank you again. Until next time, please stay safe, stay weaponized, and we will chat again soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. And listen, if you found this content valuable, here's 3 different ways that I can help you weaponize for free. First, grab a free copy of my ebook, The Education of a Weaponized Man. To get your free copy today, head to ebook.awakentheprotectar.ca. Number 2, you can take a free workshop where you will discover the 10 insights violent criminals don't want you to know. To take this workshop, head to workshop.awakentheprotectar.ca. The third way is to head to my website and check out all of my Freeline programs that cover everything from mindset to strategies. To check us out, go to awakentheprotectar.ca. And finally, leave a 5-star review so that we can reach more good people like you who are ready to weaponize and rise regardless.